Bang! The gunshot cracked through the dusty haze of Wyoming territory like a whip from hell itself, echoing off the jagged rocks of Black Ridge in the spring of 1885. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird, as the acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with the sweat of cattle and men. There I was, Clara Hale, pushed roughly onto that rickety auction block at the edge of town, my wrists bound tight with coarse rope that bit into my skin, my face shrouded in a torn burlap sack that scratched like sandpaper against my cheeks. The laughter of the crowd, rough, hollow-bellied men with weathered faces and empty eyes, rolled over me like thunder, mocking my silence, my shame, my very existence. They didn't know my name, didn't care. To them I was just another piece of frontier merchandise, up for grabs in this god-forsaken border outpost where dreams went to die. Black Ridge wasn't much of a town, more like a scar on the earth's hide, carved out by desperate souls chasing gold or land, or just a place to hide from their pasts. The air hung heavy with red dust that clung to everything, kicked up by wagons and boots, mingling with the smoke from cook fires that burned low and sullen. The scent of cow sweat and hand-rolled tobacco lingered everywhere, a constant reminder that this was no place for the faint of heart. Men gathered here to trade cattle, tools, and sometimes fates worse than death, their boots worn thin from endless trails, their hearts as hollow as the whiskey bottles they drained at night. I'd been dragged from Colorado in chains, silent as a ghost, my voice locked away behind memories too raw to speak. And now, here I stood, barefoot on splintered planks nailed haphazardly to old wagon crates, the platform creaking under my weight like it might collapse any second. The auctioneer, a wiry fella named Silas Crow, everyone knew his name because he made sure of it, wore a faded brown vest that hung loose on his scrawny frame, a rusty tin badge pinned crookedly to his chest like a badge of false authority. He banged his hammer on an upturned barrel, the sound sharp and final, his voice screeching like a rusty hinge. "All right, boys, last lot of the day. This here's a no-name gal, fresh off the trail. Ain't shown her face, but she swears she'll work hard and obey without a fuss. Startin' bid, $1. Who wants to take a chance on a mystery wrapped in sackcloth? Could be a beauty, could be a banshee, your gamble." The crowd erupted in coarse laughter, their voices blending into a cacophony that made my stomach twist. One burly ranch hand, his beard matted with chewing tobacco, hollered, "Bet she's pricklier than a desert cactus, Silas." Full of spines and secrets. Another, a skinny miner with dirt-caked nails, chimed in, "Or just a sack of laundry with opinions. Marry the sheet, boys. It talks about as much." They elbowed each other, guffawing, their eyes gleaming with that mix of boredom and cruelty that thrived in places like this. I didn't move, didn't flinch. My hands hung limp at my sides, the ropes chafing raw spots that burned with every pulse. I'd learned silence in Colorado, where words had only brought more pain. My breathing came shallow under the burlap, my fingers clenching and unclenching in a rhythm that kept me grounded, even as my mind screamed for escape. No one bid. Why would they? I was a riddle no one wanted to solve, a burden in a land where survival meant carrying only what you could handle. Silas frowned, wiping sweat from his brow with a grimy sleeve. "Come on, fellas, she's sturdy enough. Ain't nobody brave enough to unwrap the package?" The laughter died down to murmurs, men shifting on their feet, glancing away. Then the crowd parted like the Red Sea before Moses, and he stepped forward. Jack Harlan. I didn't know his name then, but the way he moved, tall and broad-shouldered, his long duster coat caked in trail dust, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing a face carved from granite, made the air thicken. His boots thudded heavy on the dry earth, each step like thunder rolling in from the plains. His hands were wrapped in leather strips, scarred from ropes and reins, the kind earned from wrestling steers and taming wild horses. There was an accent to him, a rough lilt that hinted at Australian roots mixed with American grit, a voice that rumbled low and commanding, pure cowboy masculinity that silenced the jeers without a word. $1, he said, his tone flat, unyielding. No hesitation, no glance at me beyond a quick scan. Silas blinked, leaning forward. "You sure, stranger? Ain't even want a peek under the hood?" Jack's eyes, steel gray, sharp as a hawk's, met mine through the slits in the burlap, though I doubted he could see much. "I'm buying a person, not a face. If she's willing to work and live honest, that's enough." The crowd went dead quiet, the wind itself seeming to hold its breath. Silas licked his lips, glancing around. "Well, all right then. Name for the ledger? Jack Harlan. Rancher, east of Black Ridge. He scrawled his signature without flourish, then turned to me as Silas pronounced us legally wed in the eyes of whatever law held sway here. Your name, miss, for the record? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat like thorns, but something in his steady gaze pulled them free. Clara Hale? I whispered, my voice dry and faint, carrying just enough to seal the deal. Jack didn't react, didn't smile or frown. He climbed the platform steps, his presence towering yet gentle as he reached for my wrists. His fingers were calloused but careful, untying the ropes with a patience that surprised me. The fibers fell away and pain shot through my arms, but I didn't wince. He offered his arm and I took it, descending into the stunned silence of the crowd. No more laughs, no jeers, just eyes following us as we walked away. The trail out of Black Ridge narrowed quick, dust giving way to pine needles and packed earth underfoot. Jack led the way, guiding a mule loaded with supplies, his strides even and sure. I followed, the burlap still over my head, my steps tentative but not weak. My hands, free now, stayed folded in front of me, unsure what to do with liberty after so long in chains. We walked for over an hour in silence, the pines whispering secrets overhead, the creak of leather and rustle of leaves the only sounds. My mind raced. Who was this man?
A savior or another jailer?
Fear twisted in my gut, but beneath it, a spark of curiosity flickered. Why me? Why not demand to see what he'd bought? The forest opened to a clearing on a hillside, and there stood his cabin. Dark logs hewn by hand, small but defiant against the wind. A stack of firewood leaned against one wall, a bent horseshoe nailed above the door for luck, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. It looked lived in, enduring, like it had roots sunk deep into the earth. Jack pushed the door open, revealing a tidy interior. One room, a narrow bed, a table with a single chair, a stove and a wash basin. The hearth was cold but prepared, kindling stacked neat. He stepped aside. Ain't much, but it's yours as much as mine now. No one tells you where to be. That's your call. I entered slowly, my bare feet cool on the packed dirt floor. I said nothing, touched nothing, just crossed to the far wall and crouched down. Back to the room, hands on my knees. The burlap stayed on. It was my shield, my prison, my only familiar thing in this strange new world. Jack didn't push. He hung his hat on a peg, moved to the stove, and set about building a fire. The scrape of flint, the crackle of flames, simple sounds that filled the space. He filled a pot with water, added dried roots, jerky, and herbs. The aroma rose slow and warm, smoke, salt, earth. It tugged at memories I'd buried, of home-cooked meals before everything shattered. He ladled stew into 2 bowls, setting one quietly near me without a word, the other at the table. Minutes ticked by in the fire's glow. Then my voice broke the quiet, muffled but steady. What is this? Jack stirred his bowl once. Stew, last of the supplies. Made it for myself after the war, on days when silence was all I had. Started making 2 portions even when no one was there. I shifted slightly, the burlap rustling. Why 2? His voice softened, carrying a weight of loss. For my wife. She passed in spring. Fever took her quick. Brave to the end. I kept setting it out to remind myself I was home, not still out there fighting. Now it's for her and you. The words hung there, stirring something deep in me, a ache for connection, for understanding. I reached for the bowl, my hand trembling as I lifted the spoon under the burlap. Each bite was deliberate, careful, the warmth spreading through me like a forgotten comfort. I ate it all, savoring the simple act of nourishment without fear. As Jack washed the bowls in a tin basin, I stayed by the wall, arms around my knees, facing away but no longer hiding completely. The silence wasn't empty. It hummed with possibility. A fragile spark kindled in the dim light. That night, as the fire crackled and shadows danced on the walls, Jack sat with elbows on knees, staring into the coals. No lantern lit, just the hearth's glow. Outside, wind sighed through the pines like an old man's breath. He didn't look at me, but I felt his awareness, a quiet strength that didn't demand. It had been 4 years since that brutal winter, thicker than any I'd known, stripping bark from trees and slicing through wool to bone. Jack had ridden too far north for timber he couldn't afford to lose, pride pushing him beyond safe lines. He hadn't returned when he should have. Snow crusted hard under his boots, his leg twisting sharp and final. By the time he crawled into a snowdrift, no trail left to follow. He thought, this is how men vanish, but hands, rough, quick, alive, dragged him. Pain flared, then blackness. He woke to a flickering cave, ice at the entrance, heat on his face, a bitter herbal scent in the air. Across from him sat a woman, face veiled in coarse sackcloth, tied at the neck, eyes shadowed and silent. Her coat was patched leather and worn wool, hands moving deftly as she poured dark liquid into a tin cup. "You don't need to know who I am," she'd said, "but I won't let you die." He couldn't speak then. She pressed the cup to his hands. Pine bark and lichen tea. It burned going down but steadied his breath. She splinted his leg with hot stones, kept the fire going, moved like someone used to being unseen, quiet, constant. Fever came and went, pain pulling him under. When he woke clear-headed, she was gone. The cave cold but safe, fire embers low. Beside it, folded with care, a square of cloth stitched with purple flowers and uneven thread, no bigger than a palm. He'd kept it in his coat lining, a talisman against dark days. Now, years later, the voice from that auction block, Clara Hale, was the same as the one that whispered over that tin cup in the snow. Same cadence, same weight, same silence. He needed no proof. Reaching into his pocket, his fingers closed on the cloth. He didn't pull it out, just held it there. Behind him, I shifted, the burlap whispering. I hadn't spoken more, but he turned not. In that space between hearth and wall, between years past and this room, Jack Harlan made a silent vow. He wouldn't force her to admit it, wouldn't make her relive what she hadn't offered, but he'd be damned if he'd let her vanish again. Mist clung to the tree roots the next morning, low and silver, curling against the ground. Crows cut silent paths high above, the sun filtering hesitant through the pines. I stepped out alone, crossing the porch past the empty wash basin, past the mule dozing at its post, to the tall pine at the clearing's edge, a silent sentinel, the burlap still tied loose, not choking now, its hem fluttering weakly in the breeze. My steps were slower, steadier, my spine no longer curled inward. At the tree's base, I sat, turning my face to the break in the trees where light touched the edge. Then, with both hands, I reached behind my neck. The knot loosened, the sack sliding up, revealing my nose, my mouth, the curve of my cheek. I let the air kiss my skin. It wasn't defiance, wasn't surrender. It was something in between. From the side of the cabin, Jack knelt by a wooden trough, oiling his saw's teeth. He didn't move when I came into view, didn't speak right away. Then, without looking up, turned cold one winter up near Black Ram Pass. His hand passed once over the blade. Broke my leg. Thought that was it. Thought I'd freeze out there. I didn't speak, staring at moss at my feet. But someone found me, Jack continued. Dragged me to a cave, built a fire, gave me bitter tea tasting of bark, kept me alive. He set the saw down carefully, glancing not directly at me but closer. She wore a sack over her head. Didn't say her name, hardly said anything. But I remember her voice. Silence fell. Not fearful, not guilty, just silence. Then the rustle of fabric. I pulled the burlap further off, letting it pool in my lap. My face wasn't monstrous, not ruined beyond recognition, but a scar ran deep and curved along my left cheek from ear to jaw, like something had tried to carve truth from me and failed. The boarding house owner where I worked, I said, voice level. He said I could keep my room if I gave more. I paused. I said no. My hands gripped the folded sack, knuckles white. He came at me. I fought back. He slipped, hit the stove. Didn't get up. Jack didn't move. They said I lured him, planned it, murdered him deliberate. I swallowed hard. But I think someone saw. A shadow at the door, a woman in the kitchen. She looked away. I stared past him into the woods now. No witnesses spoke up. No one stood for me. I looked back at my hands. Called me liar, temptress, killer. Jack rose slow and still. They sold me to pay his debts, I went on. Passed me hand to hand like livestock. Covered my face so no one saw the scar, so they wouldn't judge my worth before I opened my mouth. My voice trembled but didn't break. I didn't ask to be saved, I said. Didn't ask to be bought, but I'm tired of hiding. Jack took no step toward me. He didn't reach for the sack or my hand. He just stood, hands loose at his sides, and said, "Thank you for telling me." You didn't have to, but you did. His voice was soft but firm. I blinked hard once, no tears, just breath. And in that breath something loosened. For the first time since the auction block, I wasn't a shadow. I was Clara Hale, and I wasn't hiding anymore. Light shifted soft over the floorboards the next morning, golden through the window above the table. Dust motes danced in the air like silent confetti, stirred by nothing. It was the kind of morning where quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I rose slow from the bed, my hair loose and curling around my shoulders. I no longer reached for the burlap. It wasn't by the bed, wasn't folded away. It hadn't been needed. I patted across the room, expecting the usual, a bowl, a tin cup, a washcloth by the basin. Instead, something new waited on the table. A small oval mirror, silver-framed with tarnished corners but polished clean, propped against a smooth pine wedge, angled to catch the rising sun.